80% of our community relies on the art as a primary or secondary source of income. So when we have problems with things being misrepresented in the marketplace, it hurts a lot of Native people who rely on the art to make a living. We have a federal law that says it is a federal offense to misrepresent imported look-alike Indian-style product as Native American made. And for it to be Native American made, you must be from a state or federally recognized tribe of the U.S. or recognized by the Canadian government as a native of Canada. Once you meet that criteria, whatever you make can be sold as Indian made. Unfortunately, Indian made doesn't clarify value. So that's why we developed a nonprofit organization. It's a 501c3, and this is why we develop a brochure every year to help people understand there are problems with the market, and one of the biggest problems is the U.S. consumer doesn't understand there is a federal law. And when you ask them and they don't know, they need to understand too that the federal law needs to be more clarified, because Indian made doesn't tell you anything about the value of what you're buying. So we define it as handmade, handcrafted, and machine made. So machine made is basically cast or punched out by machine. Handcrafted is basically components that are put together. So whether you're using imported components, plated components, plastic materials, plastic stones, as long as a Native American from a state or federally recognized tribe is putting it together to assemble it to make something, like for instance your earrings. They bought the ring, they bought the leather, they bought the feathers, and they bought the little birds that are on there, and they put it together by hand. In Arizona, it's defined as Indian assembled. In New Mexico, it's defined as Indian crafted, but it's basically a putting together of components to make an item. Now, handmade is a different process. Handmade is when you buy the plate, wire, solder, housing, cut it, bend it, shape it, put all the stonework in. Handmade has a higher value. So saying Indian made doesn't necessarily give you an idea about the difference in value. And see, that's part of the problem with people not understanding what is the value that I'm looking at, because the federal law doesn't help address that problem. But when you get to the commercial market that we're set up in, and the promoters of most any Native event are using the 1990 Indian Arts and Crafts Act, which is now the 2000 Indian Arts and Crafts Enforcement Act, when they don't follow through and critique what's being brought in by their vendors, and they're relying on the honor system of being honest, because the promoters don't check. And when, as Native Americans, when we come selling our handmade and handcrafted items, we're also being impacted by people misrepresenting imported products, because the other part of the problem is the U.S. Customs allows products to come into the United States with a peel-off sticker and hang tag. So it may give the illusion of an Indian-style product, but even if it's hallmark and signed sterling, they can also take off a peel-off sticker and hang tag, and unless the consumer is educated, they think that coming to a Native American event, everything is Native American. That's not necessarily true, because the promoters don't screen and they don't follow up with inspections to make sure that the vendors are complying with the pictures they send in of what they're going to be selling at the event. So that's why it makes it very hard for a legitimate Native American to sell and compete with imported products that are selling at a way lesser value, because they weren't even made in this country. But they look like a Native American made product, and that's what makes it so hard.